Hello, it's Dawn Michelle and welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about the idea of practice. So we're just going to have a little ramble and a chat, and I'm going to share with you some of my thoughts on the whole idea of practice and how I approach practice and kind of what it means to me. Let's talk real quick before we get into kind of what I want to really show you, because I am going to be showing you lots of things, which is one of the reasons why I have no decorative stuff in this space, is that I think that sometimes when we use the word practice, there is this sort of insinuation that at some point there's going to be a mastery or completion of this thing we're doing. So like there's going to be an end, right? But the way I approach the idea of practice is more about approaching something deliberately with the intention to improve and grow. So the mastery or the destination, if you would, isn't really the point of the journey. It's not about getting to some imaginary finish line or completing a journal or finishing a study on a deck. It's about enjoying the journey along the way. So when we use that word practice, it's kind of a funny one because it can be used in a lot of different ways. I mean, anything that we value can be a practice in that sense, right? We can have a meditation practice, or we can have a writing practice. You can also have a legal or medical practice, so an actual service that you provide in that sense. So this whole word of practice can be used in a lot of different ways, right? Like many different words in our language. But really for me, what it comes down to, and again, I preface every video I make with this is all from my own personal opinion, perspective, and from my place of being in the world. Any activity can become a practice when it shifts from something that you're doing to almost this way of being in the world. So for me, tarot is a practice, but it's also kind of the lens through which I view my world. And it's also a tool that I use to help me navigate my world. So it is the practice as well as the thing that is practice, if that makes sense. So practice in this sense is really about the process, not just of learning, but also of sort of just becoming. It's through these practices that we learn more about who we are and what we want to do and who we hope to become in the world, right? But it's really important to also remember that every practice isn't meant to be a long-term dedicated endeavor. And that's kind of something that I really want to focus on in this video. So just like with people or tarot decks or whatever, some practices are here for, as they say, a reason, a season, and a lifetime. So sometimes when we're going about these practices, sometimes we grow beyond certain practices, kind of like a snake shedding its skin, right? We have moved beyond that. We've grown beyond that. And so we are no longer engaging in that practice because it's something that no longer applies to our growth work or maybe our spiritual work or things of that nature. Sometimes also as we dive deeper into practices or different studies, and I do just want to preface that I'm going to kind of rope studies and rituals and reading and all that kind of stuff into that idea of practice, right? So I'm just going to kind of lump them all together. Sometimes when we dive deeper into different practices or studies, we find that something that we thought was going to resonate with us in the long term just really doesn't. The more we get into it, the more we learn about it, we just kind of realize that it's really not for us, and that's totally okay. And sometimes, and this is certainly the case for me, sometimes we get so excited by these new practices or studies that we just take on too many of them. And then we kind of have to stop and prioritize what's really important for us in the moment and then save those others for later. Okay, so I have a couple of kind of weird things out here. One of the things that I kind of wanted to address, and this is kind of, okay, so like most people watching TarotTube, right, I am inspired by the things that I see other people talking about and doing. And so the other day I was watching a video from Giselle at her channel is Mad Witch. I'll leave a link to it below. I absolutely adore Giselle and everything that she creates. But she was talking about her practice and talking about that sometimes it can be really overwhelming, and sometimes we can, those things I talked about, we decide it doesn't really work for us, or maybe we just can't do it in the way that we originally intended. So I wanted to kind of, share that from my perspective as well, because I do see a lot of people, and I get a lot of comments and messages and things like that about people who see what I do, and then they think that like, I don't know, like this must be all that I do because it looks like I do a lot. Like I look like an incredibly productive person, right? And to some extent I am, but on the flip side of that, I also have a crap ton of projects that are not finished. I also have lots of things that I've started that I've never completed. I also have lots of things that I dip in and out of and I'll come back to later on and I'll shove to the side for a while. It's not so much that I'm like so deeply committed to my practice that like it is above everything else and nothing else matters, because that's not true. I have a family and, you know, a real life that I have to contend with. As much as I would love to literally spend all day, every day, just doing nothing but playing with my decks and working on my own personal growth stuff, that's just not the reality of my life, right? Like right this 5 minutes, I can hear the dryer off in the distance beeping because the clothes are ready to be folded and put away, right? That's just gonna have to wait. Priority. So, anyway, I just kind of wanted to share this because sometimes when you come to a channel like mine that is like curated, right? I mean, all of our channels are curated to our own personal perspective, to our own way of being in the world. Like everyone else in social media, what I share is just what I want y'all to see. Unless you're in my membership and then you get to see the hot mess that actually is my life. But like, social media isn't real life. YouTube isn't real life, right? You are just seeing the snapshot of this beautiful thing that someone wants to share with you. So, and that's great. Like, I'm not knocking that at all. Y'all know I love TarotTube. I watch a lot of TarotTube. Clearly, I participate in TarotTube. But I think it's also important to, you know, just keep that reminder in the back of our mind that like, you know, just because we see something that looks completely professional and perfect and polished, doesn't mean that that's the way it started out, and it doesn't mean that that's the way it always goes. So like my videos are for the most part staged. Like, let's be honest, I set a stage for my videos, and that is mostly because I want to share my stuff in the best possible light. I'm also a designer by trade, so that brings me joy. It makes me happy to create beautiful things, so that's why I create the videos the way that I do. It also takes a tremendous amount of time and effort to do that. When I make a 20-minute video, it's a 4-hour process. So you're only seeing the final version of that, right? And I only bring that up really to kind of reiterate the point that like what we see on, you know, any sort of social media platform is not hardly ever the full picture of the story. So what I wanted to talk about today is the practices and things that I am doing, have quit doing, maybe might do again, and just so that you can see like the real side, I guess, just to validate anybody who feels like they can't keep up with what they're seeing going on social media. I can't either. There's so many things that I would love to participate in. There's studies happening, you know, tags and VRs and all that kind of stuff that it's like always ongoing in the community, which is fantastic, but I do not have the time and the space to do all the things. So I have to prioritize. So the whole point of this is to show you like, here's where I have completely fallen off the wagon in my practices and, you know, how I kind of approach that sort of a thing. I give myself permission to let stuff fall away when it doesn't work for me anymore. I give myself permission to set things on the back burner. I give myself permission to stop doing things that don't work for me. And like, you can apply that to all kinds of things in life, right? Like I've talked about that with like deck collections and decluttering and all that kind of stuff, right? At the end of the day, we all have to do what works for us. So as I was kind of thinking about and putting together some sort of, I sort of notes, but not really, because like this is the extent of my notes, which I will explain here in a minute. It's on a sticky pad and there are 4 lines to it. So let's go ahead and jump in, because this is going to be just a bit of a ramble. So please bear with me as I kind of try to take this whole idea that is roaming around in my brain and try to make some sense of it. So as I was looking through and gathering stuff, this might seem kind of funny, but as I was looking through and gathering stuff to show you of like, yep, here's where I fell off the wagon, like totally cool, it happens. I was like making a list of like, yep, this is a thing I didn't do, and this is a thing that I, want to finish but haven't yet. And I realized that I was kind of bullet journaling my practice, which is just kind of amusing to me. I have done the bullet journal method, and that's not what this video is about, but it's gonna relate, I promise. So the bullet journal method is all about this like quick response, rapid logging method to planning. And I tabbed a few things here. One of the things that I did it anyway, but like it's just nice to see it in print. This is the sort of, I love this little visual. I do keep it tabbed all the time just so I can come here and kind of remind myself that this is kind of the flow of my practice, right? So it says task, but let's pretend this says practice. And the first question is it vital? Yep, if it is, then I keep it and I keep going with it. If it's not, then I ask myself, does it matter? Like, does this practice matter? Do I need to keep at it, or is it just taking up space? And if the answer to that is no, then it becomes a distraction and it goes in the bin, right? In the garbage. So I kind of love that, and that is kind of the thought process I have when it comes to my practice. I just wanted to kind of touch on that because it amuses me. Okay, so I was trying to find the whole like task key concept or key log in this book, which is not in here. So I'm thinking that that's something that maybe the bullet journal community added after the fact. But he does have this mention here of the rapid log, which is these little like symbols that you use a short form notation, it says, paired with symbols to quickly capture, categorize, and prioritize your thoughts into notes, events, and tasks. So I did that with my practice. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to create a bullet journal for my practice, although I probably could. It might be fun to do. I mean, never say never, I might at some point. But I was kind of looking at my practice through that lens, and that's where I came up with this, which is my practice contains 4 parts. And I just use the little symbols just for fun. But that is things that are in the queue. So that's things that I want to do, study, work with, practices I want to engage in or cultivate in my everyday life. Then we have in progress. So that's like the stuff I'm actually working on, right? Like things like the deck and walk or the monthly medicine. Then we have on hold, which is generally stuff that I've started, but for whatever reason have had to kind of put on the back burner, or maybe I just lost some of my motivation for it. So now it's on the back burner. And then we have canceled, which is pretty much just stuff I've either abandoned because like I just don't want to do it anymore, or because, some of those things I talked about a little bit ago, maybe I've grown beyond that practice. It doesn't apply anymore. Maybe as I got into it, I just realized that like that's not really for me, so I'm going to move on. And some of it is like going back to that little task flowchart there, the little priority flowchart of, maybe it's canceled because it actually doesn't matter and it really is just a distraction from everything else that I'm trying to do. So that was just kind of my funny little way of trying to figure out how to pull all this information together. So I thought I'd share that with you. Okay, so I don't think I have like any decks specifically that I want to talk about for the stuff that I've canceled, other than I did at one point, and there's probably a video on my channel, have a journal, and I was studying the Witch's Wisdom Tarot, and like I did that, and then I don't know what I did with the journal, but the deck has since left my collection and it's no longer in my practice or in my rotation. That's just a case of as much as I wanted it to work for me, it just really didn't. So, again, moved it on, let it go. And, that journal is probably in storage somewhere because it's like, it wasn't readily available for me to grab for this video. So I've clearly archived it in a sense. So let's talk about a couple of things that I have either sort of canceled or have morphed into other things, because I think that also happens sometimes too. Let's start with this one because this is actually like this is a lot going on the screen. I'm not sure I really love this whole thing going on, but I don't want to like restart the video. So anyway, this is my pathworking journal, and I'm not gonna like share the details of it, but what I want to show you is I started doing pathworking for my inner temple, as in like writing it down. Now, inner temple work is still something that I actively do, but I was like, oh, I'm gonna start recording all of that and writing it all down. So I'm just gonna show you. Here was the start. So that was my like, this is the thing I'm gonna do, and then April 16th, 2020. That is the only entry in this book. So I did it once, essentially, right? And I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna write down all my path working in here. And that's just not really, or like my inner temple work, and that's just not really how that practice works for me. So I abandoned the journal because, or canceled it, however you wanna say, because like, I don't need it. That's not how the practice works for me. I don't need to record the experiences because they're kind of like ingrained in my brain already. So that's definitely something I've moved on from, or canceled because that practice didn't work for me. Another thing that I sort of started and decided I didn't like this format and it didn't work for me is I was going to, or I did set up, I think I did a video on my other channel. It might have been the Mary one, but I made a whole entire like junk journal-y thing here, which was so fun. I mean, I love putting these together. And this was going to be for my dark mother or dark goddess work. And I think I spoke about it recently. I just have found that kind of divvying up the dark mother, there's not really another word for like the light mother, right? Divvying that up between different journals and practices. I mean, I do have different practices for them because I do them on the full and dark moon, but I've just worked those into this journal, which I mentioned in my journaling video. And the work that I do with the deities in general now just goes into my other notebook because it's not always so cut and dry as just one deity over another. It's more of a holistic practice maybe that kind of just ebbs and flows, and I really just found that trying to separate them out just wasn't really working for me. So like this is a whole notebook that I made for a practice that I never used. I can totally repurpose this, and that's cool. It's why I still have it. But again, this was something that I set out to do that I realized doesn't really work for me in that way or in that fashion. And so I'm going to do something different. So my study book, my study planner, right? I showed this the first 2 months of the year because I did the I Ching study in it. And this was great. I mean, it worked really well. And then I, did that into February. But then when I got into the deck and walk, like this didn't work. This format didn't work because I didn't have near enough space for what I wanted to do. And some of these other things, like this was the deck study with Celtic wisdom, I think. And like that came to an end. And so I didn't need to do it in here. But like I still have my notes. Where's my notes? I still have like all my I Ching notes in here and stuff like that. And eventually I will probably transfer this over to something that I'm going to keep long term because this is just like a calendar and I won't be keeping this long term. I only have it because I want to transfer those notes from the back into a more permanent journal. A great example of a sort of practice I started working with this that while I did finish the I Ching practice or study that we were doing, I didn't actually continue to work in this for other practices. And this is a book that I've completely abandoned. So this was back in 2021. And this was basically the first version of this book that I'm currently working in. And I did quite a bit in here. Like I started at Yule and I did quite a bit of journaling and whatever else I did in here. But here's what I wanted to show you. I got to, so July 9th, 2021 was the last thing that I did in here. And I just straight up abandoned this journal. I think it might've been around this time that I completely ditched the paper journal for the digital journal. And then, after a couple of months of that, I realized that practice doesn't work for me. I'm not a great digital journaler because I get too into the weeds with it and I won't just let things be. In here, once it's in here, it's in here. And I mean, yeah, I can cover up and I can do things like that, but it's not as easy to tweak a page. And like, that just means that like, it can kind of be done and finished and move on. Whereas like in a digital journal, it's like never finished in my brain. And that's not a good place to be. I don't want to perpetually be recreating the same thing over and over again because then I'm not doing new things. Just a handful of like things and practices that I have abandoned over the last couple of years. There's many, many more of them. I have decks that I've started to create that I've abandoned because they just, again, don't work for me anymore, or I'm just not feeling it. That's always a case too. So let's talk about some of the things that I have like on hold. And I have a hot mess of stuff to show you for this because most of this is stuff that is like in the works. This is my Ophidia Rosa journal And this is a book that I started, and if you've seen me show this journal before, you will note that I have not made any additional progress. So what I've been doing is going through the cards in order. This is a junk journal that I made too, so like it was a whole thing, and it was so much fun, and I absolutely love this book. But what I've been doing is copying the little bits from the little pamphlet guide thing that's in the box. So that's what's in the quotes, and then I've been writing my own lines for each of the cards, and then I've been creating them in a, I guess, sort of long form poem thing. I'm not a poet, and I do not know the proper way to write a poem. I mean, I probably learned in high school. Maybe touched on some of that in college, I don't remember, but it's poetry from my own, layman's term. But so see here, we have the High Priestess, and from the guidebook, it says, petals filled with water, cupping the dew, hold the power to tip and feed us the moon. And I put just my single line is silence blooms illumination. And that's my sort of my understanding of that card. And then as I've been working through this, I've been writing this poem. And whatever else just pops into my brain as I'm working through this deck. I was trying to see if I could find another. There's another one. So that's the continuation of it. So it just kind of is like this ongoing poem. So it starts here and continues here, and then I just continue working through it. But like there's a lot left to do with this journal. But it's absolutely one of my favorite journals, and I really, really love this practice, but it's not something that I actively work at all the time. This deck it's a slow burn for me in terms of that kind of work. I absolutely love this deck. I had it before, I didn't get it, I rehomed it, and then something about it just kept calling me again and again and again. And so I repurchased it and then decided to do an actual study on it. And one of the things that I found with this is that this tends to be a more of a mood thing for me. I was gonna say it's seasonal, but it's really not. It's more of a when I feel like I want to just be quiet, be introspective, really dive into the feeling state of something. And then that's when I get this out and I work on it. I have been so distracted by everything else that I'm doing that I haven't had the opportunity to do that. And honestly, that's probably something that I need to do, because like this practice, besides just learning the deck, the other thing, and allowing me to be creative, because that's always fun, the main thing that I feel like I get out of this practice is just me taking a little bit of time away from everything else and just getting really quiet, getting really introspective about things, and just kind of taking a little bit of a breather from everything else going on. It's a quite in-depth little practice that I have with it, so it's not something that like one of my mindful moment spreads where I'm just like, I'm gonna take 5 minutes, pull some cards, get a message, and then like just use that as a way to kind of just take a breath throughout the day. This is something that takes quite a bit of time. So I have to kind of create time for it. And lately I have not been making that a priority, but I probably should. But again, this is just one of those practices that like, it's not really in progress at this moment. I mean, it is, because I am still working on it. I have no plans to abandon it or cancel it, but it's kind of on hold because right now I just don't have the space, or maybe the point is that I'm choosing not to make the space to do this practice, and I probably need to. So that probably means I need to go back to that. Like, does it matter? Yes, it does. So I need to probably start making some space for this and bring it sort of back into my rotation of things that I'm working on. Okay, so like this is a hot mess. This is a on hold, again, junk journal-y thing, study of the Alice in Wonderland. Nope, the Queen Alice Tarot. Like, I was like, it has a book. I hate this. The pages get stuck, and this is why I'm going to redo this. I've got the cards. I've been sort of junk journaling this, and I've been working through the cards as they relate to the story. So like, I like wrote a whole thing. I've got, oh my goodness, I've got so much stuff in here. Like, this is my packet of stuff that I'm going to use to create this journal. I have a different cover I have a bunch of papers in here. These were other things that I had made that I didn't end up using, so I can like junk journal those into something else. I have random book pages. What I want to do is basically this thing here. I bought this and I got it like super on sale. So I just went and found like the cheapest hardback Alice in Wonderland book that I could at the time, and it was this one. I really love the colors in it, and it's got great illustrations. So what I want to do is basically turn this into a journal for my Queen Alice Tarot and that work that I'm doing with it. Get the actual deck out. Actually doing the deep dive study of this deck, which is one that I'm actually working with this month anyway. I use this deck. It's not like I'm holding on to the deck. It's not like the deck itself is on hold. I still work with it. I still use it. It works fine for me. I just want to add that deeper layer of connecting it to the stories and to view the cards through that lens as well. So like that's just a sort of deep dive into the deck through a very specific lens. It's not keeping me from working with the deck itself. Like the deck isn't on hold, but the book, the practice of the deep dive study is on hold right now. Just because, again, looking at the Ophidia Rosa, I don't have time and space to do that right now. And again, going back to my little flow chart, is it meaningful? Does it matter to me? Yes, it does. So I need to make space for that. So that's the big Queen Alice deck study and stuff that I've got on hold currently. So another sort of study that I've got on hold and that I started at the end of 2022 and then basically just got distracted with all the other stuff I have going on, and that is playing card divination. So I like have a real bare bones basic understanding of playing card divination. It all started and was inspired by this Conjure Cards deck, which I became completely fascinated with and was using a lot during, like really at the end of last year. I was using it a ton. I haven't gotten into it much this year, but it's definitely something that I want to go back to. It does have its own sort of little kind of interpretation, and I don't know that they 100% align with just kind of standard playing card divination methods, but because again, I haven't completed my study of it. I started reading this book, and this book is about more than just reading the cards. It's also throwing bones and other household fortune telling, which is fun. And I read all of the introductory information, basically everything up until the start of it, where you start learning the card meanings and things like that. This one also has like Bible verses, so please just, if you're looking for something like this, please be aware. This is a, what do they call that? Conjure? My apologies. I don't know the proper word for it, but there are a lot of biblical references in this book. Because it seems to me in the little bits of study that I've done that when it comes to like conjure magic and conjure divination in that sort of sense, again, I'm not an expert, but they are very tied into or often very tied into biblical studies and things of that nature. So be aware of that. If you're like looking at this going, oh, that looks cool, I always like to make sure that I note that for people. But anyway, learning playing cards is something that I was like, oh, I got real excited about at the end of last year. And then I had all this new stuff happening in the new year, at the beginning of this year. And I just had to put it on hold because it just, again, my brain only has so much space to do things, to retain things. And so this had to get put on hold. But it's definitely something that I'm going to come back to. It's just not something that I'm actively working with right now. Okay, so in progress, we're just going to do this real quick, like, because everything that I've been talking about in my practice videos and other things that I've been showing are kind of relating to all of this anyway. The monthly medicine, that's a practice that I consistently do every month, right? It's a practice that I write. I write every month. So obviously that's something that I continue to engage with. May is fairy tale month, which is so much fun. I've been really enjoying that. And then, which you all have saw, this is my my sacred journal. And like, I just put my sacred readings in here. Sometimes though, and one of the reasons why I want to show all this in progress stuff too is because even if I maybe forget to mention it or just, I don't know, don't think to mention it when I show these things, like a lot of times what you see here, like this is the completed product, right? What starts out and a lot of times with this kind of stuff is like chicken scratch on a page, right? It's just like I've got a notebook and I'm just chicken scratch writing things down, and it's more of an in the moment thing. And then I go back and I transfer it in here as a way to archive it. So when I'm doing readings and all of that, and maybe if anybody's interested in seeing like how I actually work my way through a reading, like from the beginning to ending up in here, let me know in the comments below and I'll try to make a video on it. I don't know if anybody's interested in that, but I'm happy to share that if that's something that you are. I may have done something similar in the past. I don't know. The problem with having so many videos is you forget what you've already talked about. But anyway, this is the final product, right? This is not what it looks like. And this is not necessary. Like, I really want to stress that too. I like this because it's creative. It allows me another level to dive into my readings and my work, but this is not what it's about. What happens on the table at the time of the reading is what it's about. And then I use this as a way to archive those encounters and those experiences. And then I can go back and also look at them and see, you know, where I want to expand, what I still need to work on. You know, it's a way for me to touch base with things I've been working through and to see how my progress is coming about and all that kind of good stuff. But like, this is the final product. So again, looking at that word practice, sometimes people see this and they think like this is the mastery of it, right? This is the end goal. And this isn't the end goal though. Like even for me, this is just the place where I keep a record of it. And then I will continue to work on all of this stuff that's in here, because for me, most of this stuff is lifelong stuff that I got to work on or work through, or I'm trying to cultivate or create in my life. And so it's never like done. It's never complete. This book may at some point become complete, or maybe I'll completely abandon it in June like I did the last time. Probably not, because I didn't start this one till March, but I may abandon it at some point. And if that happens, that's okay too. But this is not the mastery, the completion of it. This is just the archive of it. So I wanted to just kind of, you know, share that, because I think sometimes that can be really, what's the word I'm looking for? Like people can see stuff like this and think, oh my goodness, I could never do that. And like, so I'm just like not gonna even try. Like this is just my expression of my readings. That is not how most people record their reading. People like me who make these journals like this, like it's more of an art form than it is a tarot at that point, right? The tarot happens before, this becomes the art form after. At least that's how I experience it. Most of the time, my journaling that happens is chicken scratch on a page, or if I'm just journaling, then it's just free writing in whatever notebooks I have happen to laying around. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, because like I think it can be overwhelming for people who see journals like mine and think, oh my goodness, like I could never do that, so therefore that's not something I should do. It doesn't matter what it looks like to anybody else, right? It only matters what it looks like to you. So this is my Decan journal, and I wanted to show this one because at this point, I still don't have the wheel in here. Maybe that'll never happen. That's okay if it doesn't. But what I wanted to share with you is I'm gonna jump over here, and this is the start of Taurus season. Taurus Decan 1, and at this point, at the time I'm filming this video, I have still not done the Taurus 1 Mercury in Taurus reading that Marlena provided, and I haven't done any of my additional reflections or research or anything else on it. So sometimes I get behind, and that's okay. I will take some time and catch up. If I can't do things in the moment that I plan to do them, that's okay. I can always come back to it later. And if it never happens, that's okay too. So books like these are, I think, just a great reminder. And sometimes we don't see that part of it, like when we're seeing people's, you know, flip throughs of journals, or people are talking about their practices. Like we don't talk about the stuff that like for the most part didn't work out for us, or we were like halfway through and like, yeah, I'm done with this. I don't want to do it anymore, right? We don't talk about that stuff because like, what's the point? We've moved on. So, but I think it is important, and the whole point of this video is to just say that like, that's okay. Like, we can move on, we can grow beyond things, we can decide that doesn't work for me, I don't want to do it, and that's cool too. Let's talk about a few things that I have sort of in the queue, and this is just sort of a way to kind of demonstrate this whole thing of like my practice is multi-leveled and it is a go with the flow kind of a thing. So let's start with these two books. First, I'm just gonna move this stuff out of the way. So this is the Northern Mysteries and Magic, Runes and Feminine Powers, Northern Mystery and Magic. Read that backwards. This I bought back when Lisa and I were doing the rune study. And what was that, 2 years ago? Now at this point, I've never read this book. I still have it. I still want to read it. It is in the queue because at some point I'm going to come back around to my rune studies and I'm going to take it to the next level. So basically when we did the rune study, we kind of just, here's the basics of the runes and just kind of an introductory. And at some point I'm going to go into that deeper level and continue those studies. So it's like something that I have intention to do. It's not in progress currently. It's not even on hold because I haven't started that second leg of my rune journey. It's in the queue for later on. So that's one I want to talk about. The Altar Within. This isn't really a study. It's just like this I'm using as a sort of catch-all for, I have a crap ton of books that I have bought that I haven't read yet. I bought this one at the, I don't know, sometime last year. I want to say around like fall of last year, and I still haven't read it yet. It doesn't mean I'm not going to. It's just sitting there waiting for me. I will buy books a lot of the time and then just put them on my shelves to be read later. And I feel no pressure about that. I know that doesn't work for some people, but for me, I know it's there. I know at some point I want to get to it, and actually having the book on the shelf reminds me that is something that I wanted to read. And so if I just stick it in a list somewhere, or if I just stick it in an Amazon wish list or whatever, that to me just signifies that maybe I might want to. Once I've actually invested and made the purchase in it, that means that at some point I am going to come around to this because I've invested in it now, right? Like not only the money, of course, to buy the book, but like I actually took that first step of making the purchase for the thing that I want to read. And I may not get around to it for 3-4 years, and that's okay. Like, this book isn't going anywhere. I do have limited bookshelf space, so I do try to be pretty mindful about the books that I buy. But my solution is also I just start storing books in other places in my house, because like if I could have a bookshelf, a big massive bookshelf in every room of my home, that would make me super happy, because I would just love to be surrounded by all the books all the time. But anyway, that's just kind of it's standing in for every book I've bought that I haven't read yet, and there are quite a few on my shelves. So let's talk about this deck really quick. This is an example of a deck that I want to study, but haven't started, haven't set a plan for, or anything like that. It's in the queue. And this was a deck that was sent to me for review. I don't even know how many years ago now. It's been probably at least 2, if not maybe 3 or 4. I'd have to go back and look. And I felt really bad that I haven't really gotten into the deep dive of this deck. I have worked with it. So like, it's not to say that I haven't done the work with it. It has a system, and I've really only scratched the surface of it. And so that's the reason I want to deep dive with it. It is very plant-based. So I find that really, really fascinating, and it does have a beautiful big book that I really want to get into. But again, this is something that like I do really want to study at some point. I've had it sitting on my shelf to do that work with for years now. That doesn't mean that I won't get to it eventually, because I totally will. If I didn't have the intention to actually work with the deck, I would have moved it along by now. Same with the Tarot of the Holy Light. I have actually read, so there's a big book that goes along with this deck. And I read the entire thing on my Kindle, and then I bought a paperback version of it so that I could use it along with this deck to study it. Originally I was like, cool, I can use it for the Decan walk, but this has a different Decan system. So the Decan starts with the aces, not the twos, so everything is off or like shifted. So again, that's another curiosity of something I want to study to see why that is. Like I said, I have read the book. I actually read the book before I ever bought the deck. because the book is fascinating, and like it's one of those that you could study. You could use it as a book to just solely dive into the study of it. So I read the book on Kindle, then I bought the deck, and then once I had the deck on hand, I was like, okay, yeah, there's a lot going on here, and I really need to take the time to get to know this deck and to study it more in depth along with the book. So then I bought the book in paperback. And again, it's another one that I've had like on my list to study for a long time. You can usually tell a deck I haven't really worked with much yet, or I haven't started deep diving with, because it's still living in a tuck box. So that probably tells you something. I get it out, I play with it every once in a while, and then I put it back because I'm like, okay, like I can read with it out of the box, but I don't want to. I want to know what's going on in this deck. So it's another thing that like I want to study, but I haven't gotten around to that yet, and that's okay. So another case here with the Kantigi Oracle. This one I bought primarily for the book, I'll be honest. Like, I don't know about the cards. I'm not a fan of this artwork. This is one of those art styles, like this kind of thing, like creeps me out. I don't know if I can get past that enough to work with the deck, but oh my goodness, like some of them are so beautiful. But anyway, like it's not really about the deck for me with this particular deck. Here's the backs just in case. They're beautiful. I don't like round decks either, so like there's a whole lot of things about that deck that give me pause, but I really wanted to read this book. So I bought, although it's in this green, this lighter green text, and that's like, I definitely got to have my glasses on to read it. I hope that won't cause an issue like long term, but we'll see. Anyway, again, it's another one that is in the queue because I am going to work with it. I do feel like maybe this might be a good one for like spring, summer. So maybe I'll bring it out and start reading through the book then. Again, I got no clue if I'm actually going to work with the cards, but we'll see. This is one of those things that like I'm going to study it. I want to kind of see about maybe having a practice around it, because it does say it's a creative prompt deck. And I do a lot of creative work, so I'm interested to see if that's something that I can integrate into my creative practices as they are, and maybe expand upon that. And until then, like that's cool. It can just sit there waiting for me. Like it's not gonna go anywhere. So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to touch upon, was like the things that I have like in the queue to work on, and you know, the things that I'm currently working on. You know, maybe some of the things that I've just kind of got on hold for right now because I just don't have the time and the space to work on them. And then I have the things that I've completely abandoned that I'm like, that's just not working for me, and that's totally cool. Like, not everything is going to be for me, and that's fine. And part of this practice for me, or this idea of having practice, is sussing out what works for me and what doesn't. Really, what I wanted to kind of share in this video is, I guess, this is the other side of practice, where like it's not always the perfectly edited video or the perfectly curated collection or the perfectly created journal, right? That's not the reality of practice for me. It may be for some people, and that's fantastic, but for me, that's more of like the product of what comes out of my practice. It's not the practice itself. The practice itself is the doing the work. But because that is very personal work, that's not the type of stuff we tend to show here on YouTube. And I've done videos before. I'm not going to go into the whole type of videos that you find on TarotTube, right? Because I don't think that that's actually a productive conversation to have. I think a productive conversation to have would be just going out and talking about the things that you would like to see on YouTube. So if you want to see more than unboxings, then make more than unboxings, right? Make the kind of content you want to watch. I think I mentioned that in my practice wrap up for April as well. Like, I absolutely love to hear how people work with their decks. So I make a lot of content around that. I do like to hear about people's practices. So I try to incorporate as much of that as I can. I also love a good haul, because like I can fully experience the joy of something through someone else, you know, and walkthroughs I think are great, because like I can watch a walkthrough and have a little bit better idea about whether or not that deck might work for me or not. But anyway, like that's the polished side in a sense, right? That's the outcome of the work that we do, or we buy a deck and it's like the precursor to the work that we do, right? So like if I pull out a deck and I'm like, see this new deck that I got, and like, let's take a look, and I'm going to show you the cards. And part of that is me, you know, going, this is a new thing and how am I going to work with it and what am I seeing in it and, you know, what's my impression of it. I think that kind of content is really valuable. And I think it's a valuable practice to go through and look at what you've got and why you have it and what you're going to use it for. So that's kind of like the precursor, right? I've got this thing, or I've got this new book, and how am I going to use it? How am I going to work with it? And then, you know, we kind of go into the practice of those things. That doesn't tend to be the stuff that we actually see videos about, because for most of us, that stuff is really personal and that's not something you want to put out on YouTube for the masses, right? If I'm having a bad day or I'm having a personal struggle with something, I don't necessarily want to make a video and, you know, share all of my woes and all of my, you know, personal struggles or things like that on a public platform where anybody can see it and anybody can comment on it. And, you know, that part of my practice is personal to me. I do share some of that with my members, but that is more of a safe space. It's part of the reason I have a membership, is just to create some safe space here on YouTube, because it's a huge platform. So we don't tend to see the practice, the actual thing that happens, because for most of us, that is very, very personal and it's not something that you want to share for the masses. And then we see, what we do see is the precursor of here's the thing I got. And then sometimes we see the after of like the review or the, you know, here's what I thought about it, or here's how I used it, where we just kind of discuss it. And it's that middle part in between that I think sometimes has a bit of, I guess, maybe mystery around, or maybe this idea that everything starts out looking like, how do I not have a journal at hand? What did I do with it? Oh, it's underneath here. That's why. But this is not the, you know, the practice itself. This is the aftermath. This is the, what comes out of the practice type of a thing. Oh, look, I skipped a page too. So like, yeah, it's not perfect. But that's the thing I really wanted to get across in this video. I like just to kind of share that not everything works for me. And it may look like I have all of these really deep, wonderful practices. And to an extent, I do. I have worked with tarot for a lot of years. I have also worked with a lot of these practices for a lot of years. And a lot of what you see represented on my channel is coming out of that years of work and that years of practice. And I have honed things down to like the really succinct, here's what works for me, right? But that's a lot of trial and error. You know, a great example was that Alice in Wonderland journal that I showed you. Like, that was me starting with it bound, going, that didn't work. Then I redid it to a disbound and that really didn't work. And so now I'm going to try something else. That's kind of how practice goes for me in a general sense. I try it one way. Maybe it's something that I saw somebody else do that I'm like, maybe that'll work for me. And then I'll, you know, tweak it to make it actually work better for how I'm actually using things. Sometimes I will do something completely different. Sometimes I will decide, yep, that doesn't work for me at all, and I'll do something else, or I just won't do it at all anymore. So that's kind of the whole point, I guess, of this big old ramble, of just to say that, like, it's okay to like let things go. It's okay not to be on top of the practices. It's okay not to be doing everything that everybody else is doing. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I don't have the time and space for that either. As much as I would love to like engage in all the things and learn all the things and do all the things, right? I just don't have the time and space for that. And so again, going back to that little diagram in the bullet journal book of, does it work for me? Does it matter? Everything I do is kind of run through that filter of, first, is it working for me? Is it something that I actually want to do? If it is, then great, I keep it. If it's not working for me, then I kind of look at, you know, why that is and how maybe I could change it, or do I need to change it? And is it maybe just becoming a distraction? Because there's lots of things that I bring into my practice, right? Lots of things that I want to study or learn, or, you know, even new decks to that extent that I want to work with it. I realize after I kind of run it through that little list that it's really just a distraction at this point. But, you know, these are things that I've honed over the years. So if you're new to tarot, coming into this community, into TarotTube, and seeing videos like mine, like, I'll be perfectly honest, seeing videos like mine, seeing journals like mine, I think can kind of give a little bit of a skewed perspective of what most people are doing, as well as, you know, what I'm doing in an everyday sense, right? Stuff doesn't start out beautiful. I have to make it that way. And stuff doesn't start out being a super really deep intentional practice in my life. I have to set the priority to make it that way. And sometimes I'm like, this is not a priority for me right now, so I'm not going to do it. And sometimes I'm like, this just doesn't work at all, and I'm just going to go ahead and ditch that and do something different. So, okay, I've rambled long enough. I would love to know like how your practice goes. What do you think of this whole idea of practice? Again, I'm coming at it from the viewpoint as like it's just something that I'm doing to deliberately try to improve my life and grow my sense of self and my sense of understanding in the world. That is how I approach it. It's not something that's ever going to be mastered or ever going to be really done. So I just wanted to put that out there into TarotTube land and hope that it maybe helps someone else, and maybe just if nothing else, like anytime you set a practice aside or you abandon it or you like, right, it's in the queue, that's cool. Or maybe you had to put it on hold, that's cool. Maybe you canceled it altogether. Like, I just wanted to validate that's okay, right? Give yourself permission to put things on the back burner. Give yourself permission to put things in perpetual purgatory, if you will, and give yourself permission to like stop doing things that don't work for you, right? It's the same with decks. Like if a deck isn't working for you, like it's okay to let it go. There's nothing wrong with that. I keep saying I'm going to end this video, so let me end this video. So as always, I'll have links for everything I've shown here in the description box below, except for the weird stuff that I've made myself. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, and I look forward to sharing with you again soon.